Former UK Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher implemented reforms that reshaped the British economy between 1979 and 1990. She was a proponent of neoliberal economic policies which emphasized privatization, deregulation, and free market principles. Decades after her time, an admirer is positioning himself to follow in her footsteps. Just over 100 days into his presidency, Argentina's Javier Milei has implemented a series of Thatcheresque austerity and deregulation measures to revive the country's struggling economy. He devalued the peso by 50%, slashed state subsidies for fuel, and reduced the number of ministries by half. Last week, the government also said it had cut 15,000 state jobs. The move has sparked nationwide protests from powerful unions and workers.
23 colleagues were laid off from my area and 520 across the Ministry of Labour. We received an email informing us they weren't renewing our contracts and that they wouldn't pay any compensation. For this reason, we're today at the door and calling to collectively get in the building. We will organise an assembly because we don't want any of us in the street.
We have no choice but to resist, to organise ourselves and to sustain this struggle, because we know that this is arbitrary. If they do it in this way with violations, it's because they know that they're doing something unjust.
The South American nation is already facing dire economic challenges after decades of debt and financial mismanagement. Annual inflation hit 276% in February, cementing Argentina's position as having the world's worst inflation. A study showed the country's poverty rate topped 57% in January. The figure is well above where it stood when Milei took over, while UNICEF has recently warned that child poverty could reach 70% in the first quarter unless protections are strengthened. Despite social unrest and political backlash, Milei has promised to keep pushing his agenda of radical economic liberalization. But as the dust settles and his policies become clear, the true cost of Argentina's reconstruction could be his downfall. Omer Bakkaloglu, TRT World.
William Booth is a lecturer of Latin American history at University College London. He joins me now live from the UK. Great to have you here with us on TRT World. How does President Javier Milei's adoption of austerity measures in Argentina echo Margaret Thatcher's neoliberal economic policies in the UK?
It's a really important comparison to make, because the great myth about Margaret Thatcher was that she shrunk the state. She didn't, in fact, shrink the state. There was a realignment of where state resources went, and in fact, taxation increased under Margaret Thatcher. And I strongly suspect something similar will happen with Milei. There's clearly attempts going on to increase tax take on the part of the government, which in Latin America has been historically rather poor. But where it might echo Thatcher is, as you pointed out in the package before, that he's concentrating on austerity and on deregulation. Now, Congress have said deregulation of that scale is not acceptable and have sent back the omnibus bill. So he's going to have to come up with a different approach to deregulation there. But austerity is already starting to kick in, and you can see that in the rapidly rising poverty rate, which is going to send Argentina towards living conditions reminiscent of many other parts of Latin America, which Argentina has for a very long time seen itself as being much richer than. And I think this will cause political tension.
And Professor, what impact might the devaluation of the peso and the slashing of state subsidies have on Argentina's struggling economy?
It's a bit unclear so far what's going to happen, and I think there are signs that the government is trying to kick things down the road a little bit in terms of this very large bond swap that happened last month. So they're obviously a little bit worried about the immediate impact of that on the economy. They have managed to reduce interest rates, but they haven't managed to reduce inflation, and inflation is likely to increase over the next couple of months and go above 300%. Annually, partly because of the reduction in subsidies. So one big thing that's going to be reduced is the energy subsidy, and that's going to hit a lot of people very hard. And it's just going to be another increase in their outgoings in this period where people are being laid off from work.
And with Argentina facing soaring inflation rates and a staggering poverty rate, which is perhaps worse in the world right now, how effective are Milei's radical economic liberalization efforts in addressing these pressing issues?
Well, they're not going to help with either of those two things. This is the thing he keeps saying. He's saying the only way that we're going to get out of this is through hard work and saving and capitalism. And I think for a few months that will have a lot of appeal among people who look at the political class as a whole and see a whole series of failures and unsuccessful policies over much of the last 50, 70, 100 years. But I think Milei is going to ultimately struggle to come up with something different, particularly when he is placing the vast burden of these changes on those who are already experiencing poverty and joblessness. That's only going to get worse.
William Booth, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.